I, whose youth was passed in the august, unchallenged, and tranquil glories of the Victorian era, may well feel a thrill in invoking once more the prayer and the anthem. God save the Queen.
God bless you all.
I crown you with a crown of glory and righteousness.
And with it begins a new era. The new Elizabethan
I,
age.
Charles Philip Arthur George.
I, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
To my wedded wife.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
A short while ago, Buckingham Palace confirmed the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The princess died following a car accident.
I, William Arthur Philip Louis.
I, William Arthur Philip Louis.
Take thee, Catherine Elizabeth.
Take thee, Catherine Elizabeth.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
To have and to hold from this day
I,
forward.
Harry, take you, Meghan.
I, Harry, take you, Meghan.
To be my wife.
Involving Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The couple stepping down as senior members of the family.
For the couple, even stripping them of their royal titles.
One British tabloid calls it Megxit.
Welcome to BarbWire Strategy. Today we're going to talk about the royal family. Now normally I don't talk about the royal family because that's all tabloid stuff to me. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I don't really get into the royal family. But with all the stuff that's been going on the royal family and this Megxit, I think they call it, Megxit. That's where Meghan and Harry, and I believe that Meghan's forcing Prince Harry to leave Buckingham Palace, resign his titles, or at least set them aside, and move to Canada. Now, there's more to be said on that and the whole rigmarole of the royal family and all the scandals that are surrounding it. But before I do that, what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of the royal family. I've looked at the royal family a lot over the last week, and I've come to understand it. Now, first off, let's try to understand what the royal family is to Americans. Americans tend to view, I think, the royal family setting aside the fascination that we have with getting into these people's lives, like it was a daytime soap opera. But most Americans have the view of the royal family that they believe that it's a group of people, a family, that was born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And that for some reason England is hanging on to this monarchy system that is antiquated and old, and a lot of Americans believe they should get rid of it. Now that's an American point of view, and of course that's coming from a point of view of the individual, because the individual is very important in the United States. In accordance with our Constitution, the Constitution does embrace the ideals of freedom for the individual. So to look at it from that angle, though, is very obtuse. It's very anachronistic. The proper way, if you really want to understand the royal family and the whole idea of monarchy and the noble class in England, the way to understand it is this way. Set aside the royal family just for a second as individuals, and let's just look at the monarchy itself. The monarchy in England is England. You see, their constitution and their monarchy are interlaced. To take the monarchy out of England, assuming that it was just a wealthy family that the country takes care of them, I think that's an American view. If you were to take the monarchy system out and set them aside and say, okay, we're not going to have a monarchy, you would literally be tearing apart their constitution, the fibers of their government and what they're made of. To tear apart the monarchy is the same as tearing apart the English society, the English law, their constitution, the people and how they see themselves. When they look at the Queen, they don't look at a sweet old lady, and by all appearances she is this very sweet little old lady, but they don't see that. They see the embodiment of tradition, the embodiment of who they are, the backbone of the British Empire. And if you stop and look at the royals from that point of view, that they serve a purpose. Just like a man who wears a uniform, and let's say he's got stars on his shoulder, then he's a general, and you salute the general. But you're not really saluting the man, you're saluting the stars, the representation that's been embodied through a commission by the President and the Congress of the United States. So when you salute, let's say you're in the armed services, and you salute a general, you're not saluting that man, you're saluting those stars and what they symbolize. When you pay homage to the Queen, assuming you're British, then what you're doing, you're paying homage to the crown, to tradition, to the very fibers of who they are. So try to look at it from that point of view. And I think that if we look at it from that point of view, then we can come to understand the whole concept of the royal family and the peerage system of noble class easier. The next thing I want to cover is some of the terms of the royalty and the royal family and the noble class. And that is that the peerage group, there's two types of peerages, and that means to be a royal, to be a noble in England. There's two types that you can have. You can either have a life peerage or you can have an hereditary peerage. Now, the Queen of England no longer gives out inherited peerages. So if you were thinking about going over to England and becoming an earl or a duke or a viscount, and you're going to pass that on to your kids, I think, again, that's not going to happen. That hasn't happened in a very long time. But she does give out life appointments, and usually at the lowest stage in the baron level. Speaking of the stages, at the very top, of course, you've got the Queen and the Queen's household and her husband. But below that, what are the different levels? The first level is a duke. A duke is the first level below the Queen or the King. The first dukes, according to history, came around in around 1337. And then the class under them is the Marquise. The Marquise is a French word, and it means something to the effect of borders, controlling the borders of land. A marquise would be part of the land gentry in charge of great swaths of land. The next one below that is earl. Now, earls came around 800 AD, and that's the third one down. The next one below that, though, is the viscount. Viscounts came about in around 1440. So there you've got all the layers, and of course the bottom, the lowest rank, is a baron. But it's still part of the peerage group. It's still part of the noble class. So if you're a baron, then President Trump named his youngest son Baron, so I can understand why. That is of the noble class. The last word I want to talk about is primogeniture. Now, primogeniture means, now England doesn't follow primogeniture anymore, but England followed primogeniture. That means that the oldest son inherits the estate. So whoever the oldest son is, they get it all. They get the whole kit and caboodle. Now, a lot of people might say, well, that's unfair. I mean, it should be split up between all the kids. No. See, it makes sense. Everything that they did in the British Empire made sense. So why would you want primogeniture? How would that be beneficial? You got to think about it the way the British Empire looks at it. Everything is for the good of the empire, not necessarily the individual. So primogeniture comes into effect if you have an estate and you have several children, several sons. You want that oldest son to inherit the land because he's not the only one that lives on the land. A great deal of commoners live on the land. You don't need that land or that farm being split up many different ways because that can cause a disruption to your economy. England wanted to make sure that from generation to generation, things passed as easily and smoothly as possible. The best way to do that is to let your eldest son inherit the entire kit and caboodle. I believe in primogeniture. I think I'm a full believer in it, that the oldest son should inherit everything. Okay, now the next thing I want to tell you is, if you've ever wondered how we got to Queen Elizabeth, I'm going to tell you this real quick. I'm going to make it real short. But I want you to think about this. The fact that, first off, we're not going to go all the way back to King Arthur because that would be a whole nother show. But I do want to go back to King George III. Now, every American should know King George III. There's really two monarchs, principally, we should all definitely know, and that is Queen Elizabeth, because she's the current Queen of England, and the other is King George III. Now, we all ought to know King George III. Now, King George III, in case you just totally slept through all of school, was the king during the American Revolution. So we're going to go from King George III to Queen Elizabeth. King George III was the King of England from 1760 until 1820. And when he died in 1820, his son, George IV, became king, and he was king from 1820 until 1830. When George IV passed away, his brother, another son of King George III, took over. His name was William IV. William IV served from 1830 to 1837. Now, when he passed away, neither one of them had kids, by the way, but when he passed away, it would have gone to the next brother, and the next brother's name was Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent. But see, the Duke of Kent had died shortly after King George III had died, so he couldn't be king. But he had an heir, and that heir's name was Victoria, Queen Victoria, hence the Victorian age, the 19th century. Queen Victoria was queen from 1837 until she died in 1901. That is a total of 64 years. Now, King George was king for 60 years. Queen Victoria was queen for 64 years. And then after Queen Victoria died in 1901, she passed it to her son Edward VII from 1901 until 1910 when he passed away. And then after he died, it passed to his son George V, and he had it from 1910 until 1936 when he passed away. And then that's when things got a little bit troubled. The waters got a little bit muddy, just a little bit, because after he passed away, he passed it to his eldest son, Edward VIII. But Edward VIII threw everybody a curveball because, you see, he fell in love with a girl by the name of Wallis Simpson, an American socialite. And he wanted to marry her. Well, you see, the Church of England said, no, you can't do that. Because, see, Wallis Simpson, she'd been married twice before and divorced, and those husbands were still alive, and they have a law in England that says that none of the monarchy can marry somebody who had been divorced and their spouses are still alive. So they said, no, you can't be king and be married to Wallis Simpson. So he was basically king. He never actually went through a coronation, but he was king from January the 20th, 1936 until December the 11th, 1936. That's when he abdicated. And when he abdicated, he gave it to his brother. His brother became King George VI. King George VI served from 1936 until 1952 when he died of cancer. Then it went to Queen Elizabeth, and she has been queen since 1952. Now, here's the thing. Queen Elizabeth now has been queen, or queen or king. She has been a monarch longer than anybody in British history. This year, she will have been queen for 68 years. That's a long time to be a monarch. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, you should watch all of my other shows. I got a whole lineup of shows of BarbWire Strategy where we talk about an ordinary man's extraordinary point of view here on BarbWire Strategy. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. I really need you to subscribe. Subscribers are harder to come by than hen's teeth. So help me and the Donald out by subscribing and liking. And watch often. And stay tuned for my next show on BarbWire Strategy. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again. We'll see you later.